I hope you had a good lunch and are ready for an engaging second session.
We will now begin our second plenary session. It is my distinct honor to invite our moderator for this session, Mr. Muhammad Amirul Adhan, to the stage. Mr. Amirul will introduce our speaker, Dr. Vahid Parvaresh, who will be joining us online via Zoom. Mr. Amirul, this floor is yours.
Testing. All right. Thank you to the MCs. Assalamualaikum and a very good afternoon, distinguished IRoLe 2025 guests and participants. On behalf of the organizing committee, I am delighted to welcome you to the second keynote session of IRoLe 2025 entitled Words That Wound, Language, Technology, and the Rise of Online Harassment. Please give yourself a big round of applause. All right, ladies and gentlemen, as we know, the digital age has transformed the way we live, work, and communicate. While technology has provided extraordinary prospects for growth and global connection, it has also introduced new challenges, particularly to our mental and social well-being. Among these challenges is the increasing occurrence of online abuse and harassment, a phenomenon that continues to affect individuals and communities across the globe. Today's session will therefore shed light on this critical issue, examining how language and technology intersect to shape harmful online practices and what can be done to address them. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to introduce our second keynote speaker, Dr. Vahid Parvaresh, Associate Professor of Linguistics and Deputy Head of the School of Humanities and Social Sciences at Anglia Ruskin University, United Kingdom. Good day, Dr. Parvaresh. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm very well, thanks. And thanks for the invitation. Really appreciate it. Shame that I'll have to join you online. I wish I would be able to make it in person, but obviously these days traveling is a little bit difficult. But thank you very much anyway for
you're welcome.
Inviting me. I just try to share my PowerPoint to see if this is something that you can.
Yeah, let's give it a try first.
So are you? I'm now screen sharing. Is this something you can see now?
Not yet.
Okay. So let me see.
Yeah. Now it's working.
Is it coming up? So
yes.
You see my first slide?
Yes,
which
it's working fine.
Words that wound?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Okay. Yes, doctor.
Oh, excellent. So thank you, everyone.
Okay.
So I try to speak for about 40 minutes.
Yeah, but
feel free to ask me to stop whenever I should.
Yeah, sure.
And then hopefully there will be time for questions and discussions, and that's pretty much the purpose of this discussion. Would that be all right?
Yes, doctor. But before you start, we are so delighted to have you virtually with us today, and we truly appreciate you taking the time to join us in this event. If it's all right with you, doctor, I would love to share a little about your background before inviting you to deliver your keynote address.
Sure, that's fine. Thank you.
All right, great. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Parvaresh earned his PhD in Applied Linguistics from the University of Isfahan, following an MA from the University of Tehran and a BA in English Language and Literature. His research covers a wide spectrum within linguistics, including pragmatics, discourse analysis, social media pragmatics, and historical pragmatics. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to welcome Dr. Vahid Parvaresh to deliver his keynote address, Words That Wound, Language, Technology and the Rise of Online Harassment. Dr. Parvaresh, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. It is an honor to be able to speak to you virtually today, and I hope that the discussion and examples I'm going to provide help move the debate on the topic, which is, I'm sure, high on every government or every society's agenda forward. I'm going to talk about how language practices and our access to internet has kind of exposed us to a world full of online abuse, harassment, and especially offensive language. And I'm using these for the moment in a rather interchangeable way. Before I start, however, I just wanted to say that as per the title of this presentation is going to include some examples that may include blunt words, and I'm aware that different people have different thresholds. So please, by all means, if you feel that you do not want to be exposed to this language, please feel free to step out of the room. Your personal and mental well-being is more important than anything else. At the same time, I hope and I trust that the examples discussed here and the concept discussed here will be treated in an academic way. Because when you talk to generic audiences, obviously you may have to kind of be careful with what you say. But in academic context, of course, things are always open to debate in a constructive way. So do be mindful of the fact that there will be maybe a few words that you may find rather offensive. At the same time, in case you would want to learn more about what I'm going to talk about, just wanted to put this on record that most of what I'm going to say is already being finalized as part of a book for Cambridge University Press with my colleague and friend Tamina Tayyebi, and it will be published under the title of Words That Wound, Exploring Online Offensive Language. So hopefully you will be able to find this title in bookshops, hopefully in Indonesia as well, because as far as I know, Cambridge Uni has got a wide reach. So that's that. So what I'm going to talk about is this. I'm going to talk about digital age and polarization, sensitive topics, offensive spectrum, and then I'm going to kind of conceptualize my understanding of offense, and then I'm going to talk about the data and methods on which this particular study is based. And then following the discussion of the findings, hopefully we'll have enough time so you can discuss any questions or ideas that you might have. Something that most of you might have noticed, regardless of what you study or what you do professionally, is that modern society has become increasingly more polarized, with disputes across nearly all social and political issues. And my understanding is that it is also the same in Indonesia. It's not just a problem that we have here in the UK. Of course, I'm not familiar with the local context in Indonesia, but I kind of feel that thanks to the rise of the internet and especially social media apps, people hardly agree on any single topic, and whatever you say is probably gonna be taken negatively or be disputed. In and by itself, it may not be a negative thing. Part of that is freedom of expression, of course, but at the same time, what we have as a result of social media platforms is that we can hide our identities, we can adopt aliases, and then together with the power of the internet, with the anonymity, it seems that we kind of become less um, aware of the presence of others and the impact our words might have on others. So we could call this some sort of moral disengagement. So everybody has got an account on X or Twitter or Instagram, and then sometimes they see or read things that they don't like. And for some people, the first reaction would be to kind of dash out a nasty comment. And I am not, I wouldn't be surprised if someone tells me, I would be surprised really if someone says, no, there is this particular country where people do not really use social media apps for negative purposes and there is no offensive language. I think it's a global phenomenon everywhere. And you can find it across politics, across social issues, and many more. So the rise of polarization has kind of been boosted by the access, the increasingly rapid access to social media apps. And you actually find this particularly discussed by academics when it discusses or pertains to sensitive topics such as war, immigration, rights of, you know, different groups of individuals, minorities, have kind of always sparked debates across the digital spectrum. A very good example of that would be, for example, in the UK specifically, for example, we have got this issue of migrants crossing the channel in what they call illegal crossings. And then whenever someone talks about that on social media, there are always people who support it, there are always people who do not support it, which is fine. But what makes things really difficult is that when people talk to each other and express their opinions, sometimes these debates become really nasty, offensive, and to the extent that it has an impact on people's mental health, on their ability to fully function. And that is the problem. Another example would be the war, for example, in Gaza, which if you look it up on the internet, you've got all sorts of people debating and talking to each other, and that also causes a lot of disputes across the political spectrum. Things after the COVID-19 has kind of exacerbated things because globally, I think most countries are kind of financially um, less well off as they used to be. People are under more pressure, so people have got kind of less attention span as a result. Disagreements escalate to harassment, misinformation, and all sorts of things. And there are also people who spread misinformation, and this kind of misinformation really is something that adds to what we call social divide. So that's the political and geopolitical background of why offensive language and things like offensiveness matter. However, there are a few challenges in the way of understanding offensiveness or offense or offensive language. The first one is that, well, some people are rarely offended. Some people are offended a lot. So it is generally a subjective understanding, a subjective phenomenon. Some people call a certain generation snowflake because they give them the snowflake generation as a title or as a label because they're offended more often. And that's a fact in a way. I'm not going to argue with that. I think that also shows that understanding offense is more important than ever before. Another challenge in the way of understanding this phenomenon, which is top priority, is that there are things that kind of might be offensive, but then they're not be prosecutable necessarily. They might be within the remit of the law, depending on which country you are talking about. But there are also things that may not be particularly offensive, but may cause people to take offense. And another issue is that with the rise in the kind of access to the internet, we have kind of learned how to move around the moderation systems. So instead of typing up a nasty word, we could just use asterisks or you spell them out in a different way so they are not picked up immediately. Or you use metaphors, you use creative language in order to kind of bypass moderation system. So there is definitely scope for more research on what causes people to take offense and what actually causes people to take offense, rather than speculating on what could or could not be offensive. Based on our data, which I'm going to talk about, and also previous research on the topic, we have kind of for our study envisaged a spectrum of offensiveness. In the middle of the spectrum, as you can see, are words that are offensive. Okay, they're offensive. Someone says something that you think was offended or you didn't expect it, a friend, a colleague at work maybe, or stranger says something, you don't like it, that's the offensive word. But of course, that might have a huge impact on you. But sometimes what they say is considered as grossly offensive. So let's say someone attacks your nationality, who you are, your identity in a grossly offensive manner. And that is where things might become prosecutable, legally not possible to speak like that. So if you do that, you cross a line and you are subjected, maybe in some contexts, are more likely to be prosecuted. At the other end of the spectrum, however, are things that are just not polite. You know, you would expect more politeness from someone, but they kind of not exhibiting that level of politeness. So as you can see, I mean, they all could cause offense, but they're not the different. And so much depends on, of course, who you are, your perception, the perception of who said that, the circumstances, and many more. And if it leans towards the grossly offensive side, that is where in most countries around the world, in the UK, for example, there is specific legal pieces of legislation for that, for those cases, and you could actually take that further. But when something is not like that, that is where the problem is. So someone says something particularly offended, but you can't do anything about it. is like maybe even as hurtful, more hurtful than something that is grossly offensive. But then back to the theme of your conference, I think that's where understanding language could help the development of things that could prevent people from becoming less comfortable in their own life. Because if you keep exposing people to offensive content, then the risk is that you would end up having a generation of, for example, young people who are suffering from all sorts of mental health issues. But you may wonder why and how come current policies have been rather unsuccessful in tackling offensive language. I mean, these media companies, social media companies, have got access to billions of dollars or pounds of assets, and they can indeed moderate and tackle online offensive content. But the question is, if they have those systems in place, how come things haven't been as successful as you would want them to be? There are many reasons for that. But before discussing why they haven't been successful, it's important to see what they are doing. So, of course, things have changed over the past couple of years dramatically with the cuts on their budgets, and they're trying to kind of manage costs. But generally, they had in place keyword recognition. So if you typed in F words, for example, then they would take it out, right? Or you would ask you, are you sure? The system would ask you on Instagram, for example, using an F word, are you sure you want to send this comment? Then they moved towards more intelligence systems where content is being moderated, and if they realize that it is offensive, they take it down. And but these efforts have not been successful because 100% successful because we deal with offensive language. It's not just F words or C word and things like that. Offensive language could be non-offensive looking. Someone might say, something that doesn't really have any offensive words, but you may take offense, right? So that makes it difficult. And then historically, when social media companies have worked on what they call data annotation, they look at examples and try to annotate what is offensive, what is not offensive, to train their models. That the problem is that that kind of training is also subjective and inconsistent. And there is solid evidence pointing to the fact that if you are a moderator working in a company, let's say Facebook, Google, and these companies, and then you are like you're encountering a tweet in African American English, research shows that those moderators were more likely to label it as offensive. So the identity of who's sending it has kind of impacted their decision making. So there is bias in data annotation, and that is why what we are talking about in the field of linguistics could potentially be important. So, what is it that we are exactly talking about? We are talking about offense, but we are aware of the fact that offense has got two sides to it. What we have done, we have looked up the word offense and offensive in the word English internet discourse, in internet corpus, which is available on the Sketch engine, which I talk about. It's got billions of words. We have kind of looked at the word offensive and offense, and we've realized that when people say offensive or offense, sometimes these words, the words that collocate with offense, show that offense definitely has a legal side to it. So it has a law-informed dimension, or what we call legal transgression. Something like, for example, in the field of language, when you are grossly offensive, talking nasty to someone because they are, for example, of a particular background or skin color or things like that. But there are also occasions where offense comes out of your daily interactions simply because you didn't expect to see or hear certain things done by certain groups of people. Let's say you thought that you were not treated fairly, you expected someone to do this for you, they didn't. But at the end of the day, you you are offended, and that offense doesn't stop there. You may take it further. You could stop talking to them. You could talk to them and say, oh, well, what you said was quite offensive. You may not visit that particular page again. So it is a social action. It's not, it is a continuous process which impacts all your life in a way. So this is kind of the understanding of offense. It has a legal side. That is why some offenses are punishable, for example, or prosecutable. And it also has got a more social side to it, which is kind of daily routine activities of our daily life, as Garfinkel puts it, for example. So if when we talk about the legal side of it, for example, in the UK, for example, and you may find, of course, relevant pieces of legislation in the context of Indonesia as well. But in the UK, for example, you've got the Malicious Communication Act, the Communications Act. Recently, you've got the Online Safety, and obviously there are pieces of legislation that deal with that. A very clear example of how these kind of pieces of legislation were acted upon. You can Google this case of Caroline Perez, who was a journalist, a activist who basically asked and campaigned for Bank of England to put a picture or image of a female on Bank of England notes. So basically, she was saying shouldn't be just men, should add in the picture of image of women as well, the banknotes. And she started a campaign, and of course she was successful. But during the campaign, she received a lot of bullying and harassment online, on Twitter specifically. So some of the sample tweets are like that, the ones that you see here, and she she received a lot of them, and to the extent that it was basically taken to court, and two of the people who were responsible for sending those tweets were sentenced to prison for a few months. So when you say offensive things and it kind of crosses the line of, depending on legal legislation, the pieces of legislation, that could become an example of, if you look at previously what I said, a kind of a law informed, in the sense that it is kind of prosecutable, and grossly offensive language is sometimes part of that. So there are so many examples, and in the book I mentioned, we've discussed a lot of them. Hopefully they'll be available later on, but you can also look up cases in the UK. Usually you see you can find all the kind of information around that particular case, and many more cases. If you look up in the UK, for example, the Crown Prosecution Service, the cases that have been taken to court, and it's available as part of the public domain. Sometimes, however, these these interactions are not part of that kind of necessarily the legal side. It is what we call, following Garfinkel's rule, govern activities. So let's say you do not expect, for example, a colleague of you at work, for example, to be, for example, demanding too much from you at work when they haven't in the past not done much for you. You see what I mean? So it's a kind of expectation based, and depends on the context. So most of the linguistic side of things, when it comes to morality, things you think are wrong, right or wrong, are usually part of this, the moral side or interactional side of offense. And usually, even something like that happens, you start talking about it or thinking about it. Why did such and such did this? Didn't expect this from them. I feel bad, and that is part of the kind of moralization process. So, to cut a long story short, more the offense has got two aspects to it: the legal side and the kind of more interactional side. So, simply because, and that's the very basic and most important, at the same time, most important fundamental question is this. We know about how the layers of offense, okay, it has a legal side, has got a moral interactional side. And at the same time, we know that offense has been on the rise. So something that is missing here is that not much has been done on actually how people feel about being offended. Most of research is actually about language that we think might be offensive, right? We don't really have a lot of studies that discuss examples that have actually caused offense. In other words, most studies rely on analyst or linguist's observation, and the data comes from examples that you don't know if they caused offense or not, right? So in our study, we've tried to focus on the language of offensive comments, but rather than us deciding what was or what was not offensive, we have relied on people who have got a social media presence to tell us what comments they found offensive. So it has got a very authentic sense to it, rather than just relying on our own knowledge as linguists. So you may wonder how we collected the data. So if you look up Facebook, YouTube, for example, there are videos tagged reading my mean comments or similar. And these videos are usually recorded by people who have an online presence. Let's say they are content creators or influencers, and they receive a lot of nasty comments. And sometimes they make videos talking about those comments. So that gives us a very good clue into what is it that people find offensive. So we've watched, with the help of a research assistant, a lot of these videos and actually transcribed the actual comments. So because when someone says, this comment offended me, then you have to trust them, right? For research purposes, that would be much better than us deciding what is good, what is bad. And we transcribed it, of course. And then as part of the transcription, we managed to come together to put together a corpus of or data set of offensive language, which was unique in a way. So we've got like a big, not a large corpus, which has got a lot of offensive comments, but offensive not in the sense of using F words and things like that. It's more broad than that. We have used Sketch Engine, which is a corpus linguistics tool. For those who don't know about that, it is kind of available to some extent initially for free, but of course you would need to pay a subscription later if you use it for more than a few days. And then we have used W Matrix, which is also a software that allows you to kind of understand more about the language used. So as you can see, this is kind of the word cloud. Most of the content um, comes from people who have got vloggers or talk about their lifestyle, beauty, fashion, comedy. So we have excluded activist discourse, political discourse, for example, because those are already polarizing, and they receive different types of nasty comments. So if you look at politicians, for example, they receive a lot of nasty comments on Twitter, but that's not our purpose because they always do. It's what we are interested in is more day-to-day, daily life of people. So, and at the same time, we didn't focus on celebrities per se, because celebrities have got tens of millions of followers, let's say. What we have focused on, as you can see, these are our participants who produce those videos. As you can see, they have most of them fall below 2 million followers. So they are more organic rather than celebrities. We were not interested in David Beckham, for example, got millions and millions of followers. We're interested more like ordinary people rather than big celebrities. So the corpus was short of 17,000 words, our data. And of course, we compared it to the English web corpus, which is a massive corpus of generic English used on the internet. Because when you have your own data, in order to make sure it makes the comparisons make sense, you would need to have some sort of a more generic reference, right? So we compare that together. So what we have found is that for more ordinary people who have got social media presence, the language they are subjected to has got a number of features compared to the generic English data. First of all, it is increasingly showing signs of second-person pronoun overuse. So you have got more examples of those pronouns. You got increasingly more frequent uses of first-person pronouns. And you got a lot more examples or instances of WH words, which is very, very interesting for us. You got a lot more adverbs and adjectives. And if you put those together, and we've got a lot of symbols, such as the one you see, which shows, well, people are aware that the comments are nasty. So instead of the word F-U-C-K, which is quite a nasty word, quite offensive, they use F plus asterisks. But interestingly, that doesn't make the offense any less severe. People still take offense. These are actual examples that people see that asterisk, but they are still offended. So based on our own analysis, because second person pronoun is used, first person pronoun is way more than generic English. So we've concluded and demonstrated empirically that the ordinary discourse of offensive language is offensive because it is quite personal. It is quite opinionated because it has got a lot of you are this, you are that. I think you are bad. I think you are this. I think you are that. So it's quite personal and opinionated. It is quite inquisitive and intrusive. And that is why you get a lot of WH questions. It is such an intrusive discourse. Keep asking questions. And of course, sometimes these questions are not real questions. They're perceived as rhetorical questions. Just two examples. if I had a face like yours, I would sue my parents. So, you can see the kind of the personal and opinionated discourse of I there. Have you? How do you have 1 million subscribers? Even if you had 10, I would be devastated. So you see the kind of the personal, opinionated, judgmental discourse. Thirdly, it is quite critical. That is why you have a significantly more portion of adjectives that are nasty. You also have a higher proportion of censored expressions. So people are aware that these are nasty words, offensive words. So they kind of try to bypass the moderation. That is why symbols are more frequent in that type of discourse. So it's excessive punctuation. Excessive punctuation is also another feature, which maybe is used to express anger, for example. So if you look at if you look at the first column from the left, you can see the adjectives of our corpus. So fat, funny, and by funny I mean not funny in the sense of you think you're funny, she's you're not funny, and bad or the first and fake. But if you look at the fourth column from the left, that the one starting with good, new, great, and high, that is the most frequent adjectives of a general corpus, of our general corpus. So you see the difference, right? Adjectives become all of a sudden quite nasty as per the um, um, the discourse of offensive and the judgmental nature of that which we talked about. Something else that we did was we looked at the domains. So for those who are not aware or familiar with domains, and most of you probably are, so excuse my over explanation. So if you look at a building site, for example, brick, mortar, builders, they're all part of the semantic domain, right? Um, in our case, our data shows that it has got a lot of examples that could be easily put into different categories. So language that deals with aversion is quite frequent. You see examples like, I hate you hating this. Language that deals with evaluation is quite frequent. And language that is about personality types, calling people foolish and selfish is quite frequent. Physical attributes are quite frequent. Hair, face, head. You may wonder, what's wrong with that? Nothing is wrong with that. The problem is, if your hair is a certain way, people make fun of you on the internet, right? So if someone is like me, is relatively bald or bald, so they make fun of it. So that is why hair is so important. Your head is so important, your nose is important, your mouth is important. So people pick on every aspect of your anatomy or your body. That's quite interesting. When it comes to abilities and attention, they accuse you of being a loser, for example. In terms of relationships, if you, I don't know, have a boyfriend, for example, I don't know, accusing you of having sexual affairs and these sorts of things. Objects, food, what you eat. What is it that you're eating exactly? But what you eat is also subjected to scrutiny. So domains are quite interesting area for research. And if you look at the the keywords, there are words that kind of just stand out if you look at them. And in terms, and some are taboo, of course, probably unsurprising. Eh? You have got the N word, the C word, for example, the F word. You've got a wide range of negative adjectives. But what is quite interesting, back to the previous discussion, is that your objects, such as your video, what they call objects, but your forehead, your bag, the bag you're carrying, for example, these are key words that people even if the content of your video is not about that, if you're just carrying a bag in the video, people take issue with that. And they attack your parents sometimes. Mom and dad is quite frequent, and that is quite interesting. So what this shows to us is that, well, yes, there are words that are quite context sensitive, but as far as our data shows, it seems that the literal meaning of the words, such as the F word, N word, and many more, are actually quite robustly still there and being used, which leads us to the conclusion that, rather than context taking precedence, it is actually the literal meaning that is sometimes more prominently at work. Another area of research, layer of analysis that we did, we looked at the structure of words, the structure of sentences. And as you can see, there is a lot of similarity. So there are so many examples that begin with look like a, or I hate you, you look like a. And if you look at you look like a, what you get is words that are not quite positive. You look like a rat, for example. You look like a usually negative word. So there is no positive word that they collocate with. So these what we call in English we call these engrams. So they allow us to kind of predict what is going on. So on social media, if you have a sentence beginning with look like, it's more likely that it's going to be a negative comment than a positive one. Because if you look at examples, you look like a mock, you look like a terrorist, you look like a baby. As you can see, you've got a long list of words that are all negative, all negative. There's no positive. You look like a gorilla. So one way of prediction is that, you could look at the structure of words. Structure is actually quite meaningful. So some people tend to forget about structure and focus more on meaning, but I think they work in tandem. Another area which we tried to do, I'm aware of time, and I think I should stop in maybe 2-3 minutes. I think hopefully it'll be fine.
Yeah. We have about 2 to 3 minutes left.
Okay, sure.
Yeah,
I'll wrap
okay.
up. So thank you. Another area which kind of we talked about the explicit side, right? We took out those offensive words, just the F word, for example, and it left us with a smaller corpus. Our purpose was to focus on the implicit side, which is what we talked about so far was rather explicit. So we took out those nasty comments and nasty words, and we're left with a smaller corpus. So we compared the corpus or the data set that had nasty words to the one that had fewer of those examples, which we call the less explicit one, because we wanted to see what is going on in the less explicit one. As you can see, so we compared the two. I'm just focusing on the first column on the left. So as you can see, in the less explicit corpus, boy, person, man, girl, and woman are keywords, which is quite interesting. Whereas in the previous example, the explicit one, you had F words, you had N word, you had C word, a lot of nasty words. But you don't necessarily get nasty words, but you get nasty ideas, offensive ideas. So having run a deeper layer of analysis, it was revealed that the implied corpus, the more creative corpus of offensive words, has got a lot of what we call gender bias, racial bias, and age bias, among others. And in order to give you an example of what we mean by, for example, a gender bias, you look at someone and you don't like the way they are dressed, or the way they are behaving, or the way they look. So the comment was, is she a girl or a boy? You see the gender bias, right? Is she a boy or a girl? And then you've got a lot of racial bias, like two white girls with hip hop opinions. Wow. So you see the kind of the sarcasm and mockery in this. So what we have also concluded in our study is that it is definitely a spectrum of offensiveness, from more offensive, more explicit to less explicit. But what is particularly noticeable, and I conclude after this slide, is that we also found examples that didn't have any of these features, which we call kind of purely creative examples. And an example of that is a comment like this. Someone has said, your girlfriend is so hot, and the person has taken offense and saying that, do you think I'm not good enough for her? So, or someone has commented something along the lines of, your son's behavior is impressive, and the son in question has had some bipolar conditions and everybody knows about it. And the person who's received the comment has taken offense, saying, do you think something is wrong with my child? You didn't expect this to. So what you see is a comment which doesn't necessarily have offensive words, but it has been taken as offensive, perceived as offensive. And these are the examples that we would call we've called unmarked. Analysis of that has been the most challenging, because there isn't much linguistic or lexically marked there. It is the overall message and the background. And this is an area where maybe as people become more aware of the impact of their words and the fact that they might be prosecuted, they might be taken down, their account might be closed, that we see more and more examples of those. And at the same time, they may or may not have meant those comments to be perceived as offensive. So there is also a human kind of agency in what we say. So
Yeah.
just to wrap up very quickly.
Okay.
It is quite an interesting phenomenon. It is a complex phenomenon, but there are certainly ethical issues in data collection, data analysis, because most of things are not public, and you would deal with a lot of comments that have got that use the names of people. So at the same time, I think this is the area, the implicit side of it and the legal side of it are actually fascinating areas for future research, and for any country who would want to have sustainable growth in mental health and well-being, there is definitely room to understand why people take offense, why people cause offense, and what the features of those messages are. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope what I discussed can lead to some discussion later on, depending on your situation and your circumstances. So thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you very
Appreciate it.
much, Dr. Parvaresh, for that engaging and thought-provoking talk. You have provided us with valuable insights into the complexities of language, culture, and technology, highlighting how this course not only shapes but also reflects broader social realities. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now move on to the Q&A session. This is an excellent opportunity for all participants to share their questions or reflections regarding what has been presented by our speaker. For those joining us online, we kindly ask that you use the raise hand button to indicate your interest in asking a question. And once acknowledged, please switch on your camera and your microphone to pose your questions directly rather than typing it in the chat box. And for those who are attending it physically, you are also welcome to ask any question that you would like to address to our speaker. Do you have any question from the attendee? Yeah, we have one question.
Ke siapa?
Okay, sir. So I want to ask about the keywords in glance. So I've planned to do my undergraduate thesis about social media discourse, and then I'm afraid that I cannot categorize the keywords about. So I took the data from some comments on TikTok video, and then I'm afraid that I cannot like categorize the keywords. So do you have any like tips for me to how do I specify maybe the words like he is evil? So how can I like categorize the keyword as maybe judgmental or maybe some kind of offensive language so I can like interpret or describe the analyze more like deeply or clearly. Do you get it? I'm afraid I cannot
Yeah.
Sure, of course. Yeah.
explain it.
Yeah, I hear
Okay,
that.
thank you for the
I had
question.
I had you. Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you. So I think that's a very, very important question and something that matters a lot when you want to do a proper analysis. So it depends what you mean by keywords. If you mean extracting keywords, the best way would be to compare your data to a reference corpus. A sketch engine, for example, allows you to do that. So, for example, if you've got your Instagram or TikTok comments, you save those in a file and then you compare those to a, let's say, British national corpus or an Indonesian generic language corpus, okay, if the data is in Indonesian, for example, or any other language. So that's one way, and a sketch engine does it for you. But if by coding you mean how to decide what is the content of that particular word, you would need a framework. I would say that mainstream politeness theory would be a good framework for you. Maybe work by Jonathan Culpeper, the kind of strategies of politeness could be useful. At the same time, you could use, if you're dealing with emotions of those words, you could use, for example, appraisal theory for that, and you can easily Google that. So like I said, depending on what you want to do. But if it is corpus linguistics, the best way would be to use a software that allows you to compare X to Y. And of course, I'm happy for you to contact me through email later if you want me to provide you with more info.
Yeah.
I hope
All
I
right.
answered your question.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Parvaresh. Do we have any other question? Yes, one more question from the physical attendees.
Okay, Mr. Vahid, I want to ask a particular question about very specific topic that maybe sound a little bit sensitive, but I want your insight about this question of mine. As we all know, the uses of social media is to make our voice being heard, because it's the right of people to let their voice being heard by the others, to promote themselves. But in terms of that, like the example case is X. It was the app that used to voice your opinion or tweet something that you specifically have on your mind. And specific stuff like topic, like in terms of gender, sexuality, race, and etc.
Yeah.
like that. Like I see a lot of pattern where Twitter boosts that kind of topics to be more seen by people, so it become more relevant to the people. But at the same time, it also causes much bigger conflict in the Twitter itself. I want to ask your opinion. What
Yeah.
do you think? Okay, wait. What do you think about that? Should we do more like probably prohibition about tweeting this kind of stuff, or should we limit the language itself? Thank you. That's for me.
Okay, thank you for the question.
Thank you. That's a very good question. I wish I knew the answer. The problem with answering that question is that it also is open to dispute and polarization. So the question is, if I understood you correctly, what would be the best? Would it be right or wrong to kind of control that kind of content, let's say on X or Twitter? So these social media companies have algorithms, and that is where things become a little bit difficult for ordinary people. So they may not like this, what I'm going to say, but that's a fact. So their algorithm is trained a certain way. So it usually trained in such a way as to kind of make polarizing things, polarizing ideas, and generally negative ideas more prominent than positive ones. Because it is in controversial topics that people leave comments. It is controversial comments that attract more visitors. And they want this because it helps with the algorithm, and they can claim that they have got millions or billions of users. But when it comes to the actual content, what you are allowed to say depends on the policy of that particular company. X has been taken over by Elon Musk, and he claims that he has made it more free in terms of what people can or cannot say. And this is what he says. I don't have any particular evidence to support that, but what I can say is that the polarizing discourse of more right-wing discourse has become more frequent. At least those are not easily taken down than in the past. But my personal view, however, is that offensive language needs to be seen in context. You can't take out a single comment from someone and then weaponize it against them. I think this needs to be taken more cautiously and more carefully. Sometimes some governments have taken this too far. You need to look at the history of the comment, the background to that comment. But at the same time, you wouldn't want to stay in a situation where too many people are being too nasty to each other simply because they have a different opinion. So I think for our purposes, the best way would be to educate people who are beginning to use social media. And maybe some scholars have also recommended banning social media for maybe under 16. And that is particularly the case, for example, in Australia is moving towards that. So yeah, I mean, it is a controversial one, but what I'm going to say is that any comment needs to be looked at in its entirety. But remember that social media companies are less likely to take down those comments easily because they want traction, they want visits, they want algorithms to work. So it's actually on the individuals to make sure they have robust systems in place for themselves and for their families to in the face of those comments. I hope I kind of answered your question, but I know it needs more time to be properly tackled.
All right, Doctor, I'm afraid that we are approaching the end of our allocated time, but we shall now take one last question from our online attendee. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Hello, Dr. Parvaresh. Thank you so much for your presentation. So I have a question.
Sure.
Actually, so like the phrase like speak English here in the UK, I've read that so many times, especially on Instagram reels or any videos, especially when the video is about immigrants speaking their own language. So from your expertise, Syrian, how should we understand it? Is it like part of nationalism? Is it offensive language, or does it cross into racism that could be persecuted?
Sorry, which
Indonesia, for
expression?
example.
Sorry, which expression?
Sorry?
So you said which expression in the UK?
You should speak English. You're in the UK,
Okay.
I've read, yeah, something like
Ah,
that,
okay. Yeah,
because
yeah.
especially when the video, the
Yeah,
visuals
yeah,
are like
I see
immigrants
what you
talking,
mean.
yeah,
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
yeah. So what do you think about this? Because in Indonesia as well, like in Bali, for example, there are so many migrants from all over the world, and instead of like speaking Bahasa Indonesia or local language, they tend to speak English without caring much about learning the local language. And as an Indonesian, I feel like, to me personally, it's kind of offensive. But
Yeah,
what
yeah.
about it yeah? What about in the UK? Because it's quite cultural.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a very good question, and at the same time could be again leading to polarization. So if you the thing is, if in sociolinguistics, the idea is that language and language expectations come from power, right? So those who have been historically more powerful expect others to speak their language rather than the other way around. So it's like when you speak to someone whose first language is English, regardless of which country you come from, generally the expectation is that you speak English as well or try to speak English, because that comes from a kind of a historical kind of events and historical developments across time and space. But then I would say, and that was the purpose of my talk as well, that offense needs to be dealt with in a local context. So if someone has said something like that, by which they have meant that it is your responsibility to learn my language because I happen to be more powerful than you, so then that's crossing the line in terms of power dynamics, and it could be quite offensive. But if someone has said you should speak English because the language that we have agreed on is English for this particular purpose, then that should be fine. But if the expectation is that your English is not good enough, so I'm looking down upon you, and if that's a kind of attitude playing with people's attitudes, or expressing your negative judgment towards that particular accent, then it is definitely something to be looked down upon, and it's not acceptable. And that makes my talk, I think, worthy of attention. Of offense is locally situated in many cases. So it depends who says what, to whom, under what circumstances. But if it is a position of power, of I expect you to learn that particular language because I'm simply more powerful, that's not acceptable. But if, for example, like I said, circumstances have changed, and that would be under different circumstances, then they might have a different meaning. So I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, I believe
Thank you.
so. All right. I guess
Thank you.
that's all for the Q&A session. Thank you, Dr. Parvaresh, and thank you to all for all the excellent questions. Unfortunately, we won't be able to address everything now, but I'm sure Dr. Parvaresh's work will continue to spark discussion beyond today's session.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much again, Dr. Vahid Parvaresh, for that insightful keynotes address and for engaging so thoughtfully with the questions from our participants. Your presentation has highlighted how the careful study of language can illuminate the hidden but harmful patterns of online harassment, and how linguistic analysis can contribute to more systematic solutions to this pressing social issue. On behalf of the IRoLe 2025 Organizing Committee, I extend our sincere appreciation to Dr. Parvaresh for sharing his expertise and scholarship with us today, and to all participants for your active engagement and lively discussion throughout this session. This concludes our second keynote session. We hope that the ideas shared today will inspire further dialogue, research, and action beyond the conference. With that, thank you very much and have a nice day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Parvaresh, for that engaging and insightful presentation. We also would like to thank Mr. IRoLe for moderating the session. Please give them both a round of applause. For Mr. IRoLe, you may be seated.
Thank you. I'm just trying to get out of your hair and hang up. I don't know how to hang up, but anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. In just a few moments, we will be transitioning to our parallel sessions. All participants are kindly asked to proceed to your assigned rooms. After these sessions, we will have a short coffee break and continue to the next parallel sessions at 3:30 p.m.
I would like to also inform that you can refer to the parallel room scheduling from the screen that we have shown you before. And for the ones that have not submitted their presentation PowerPoint, you may submit them through the given link and QR code that we have provided. Thank you very much.